what just happened with the president?
Leslie, President Trump is a man who speaks his mind. I think it's one of the great strengths that he's had as President of the United States, is that the American people always know where they stand. And he's always ready to make the case for the American people and the case for the progress that we've made over the last 3.5 years.
Why did he walk out and end the interview like that? Well, you walked out with him, right?
Well, Leslie, you spent the better part of an hour with the president. And the American people heard the passion that he has for this country, his determination to bring our country all the way back and then some. And the American people know that in this time, it's less about the back and forth with the media, and it's really more about how we bring this country all the way back. Okay. You know, in our first 3 years, Leslie, this president kept every promise that he made to the American people.
No, we didn't do infrastructure.
We rebuilt our military. We revived the economy by cutting taxes, rolling back regulation, unleashing American energy, fighting for free and fair trade. We saw more than 200 conservatives appointed to our federal courts at every level. We stood with law and order. And in those first 3 years, 7 million jobs created, America standing strong in the world again, standing with our allies, standing up to our enemies, our constitutional foundation strengthened. And then, over the last 8 months, the American people have seen President Trump's leadership through one of the most challenging times in the last century in the life of this nation.
Are you not going to answer our questions?
I'm here to answer your questions.
Well, you're the head of the Corona Task Force, so I do have some questions about that. So let's say there's a mother out there, let's say in a hot spot in Wisconsin, and she's wondering whether she should send her children to school. What's your advice?
Well, first and foremost, that mother should know that from very early on in this pandemic, President Trump has always put the health of Americans and American families first. That's why he did what no American president had ever done when he suspended all travel from China in January. Now, Joe Biden called that xenophobic, said it was hysterical, he said it would make things worse. But the president took that action that, as the head of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, Leslie, I'm convinced saved untold American lives. And it gave us the opportunity to launch the greatest national mobilization since World War II. We spun up new testing, 120 million tests done. And we just distributed 100 million tests to our school nurses and administrators around America. We're absolutely determined to make sure our doctors, our nurses, and those that are operating our schools and all our institutions have the resources, the testing, PPE, to be able to operate safely. But we've got to open up America again. And we've got to open up America's schools.
But you didn't answer the question.
Leslie, if I may, it was the American Academy of Pediatricians that said months ago that distance learning is no substitute for in-the-classroom learning. My wife's been a school teacher for nearly 40 years. She's actually back in her classroom already at a little Christian school not far from our nation's capital, and she's teaching. And so they're doing it under conditions that are safe and responsible. But Leslie, we got to get our kids back in school. And I would say to that mother, or any mother, that we're going to continue to work our hearts out to make sure that those schools have the testing, have the PPE, have the supplies they need to get our kids back where they belong, safe and sound in the classroom.
So are you saying she should send the kids back? Should the kids wear masks?
I think they should adhere to whatever criteria the school administrators and local health officials determine to be appropriate. But really, again, I want to say the American Academy of Pediatricians made it clear early on that distance learning, this online learning, is no substitute for being in the classroom. You can't let our kids, whether it's K through 12 or whether it's higher education, fall behind in this year. We got to get them back in school. We're getting them back in schools all across America. And it's a big part of opening up America again.
What about Thanksgiving? Should people feel safe to get together with their family, with their grandparents, with their aunts and uncles?
Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays.
Me too.
And I'm looking forward to it with our family.
With extended?
I think that's a decision every American family can make based on the circumstances in their community, the vulnerability of particular family members. You know, one of the things we apprehended early on is that seniors, particularly those with serious underlying health conditions, are the most at risk for a serious outcome if they contract the coronavirus. And so families may make a decision that certain elderly family members might take a pass. But I think the difference between President Trump and me and some of the public voices in this debate over the last year has been we trust the American people. I mean, I can't help but think about that day. I can't help but think about that day in early March, Leslie, when Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and our experts came into the Oval Office. They said to the president, unless you make an unprecedented decision to shut down half of the American economy, that we would lose 2.2 million American lives. And there, the President of the United States, the leader of the greatest economy on earth, made the decision on the spot. And on March 15th, we asked the American people to make incredible sacrifices to slow the spread, to flatten the curve. And they did that. For 45 days, Americans made incredible sacrifices, putting the health of their families, the health of their neighbors, the health of customers and employees first. And all along the way, we've continued to give that very best counsel. But I think today, while we grieve the loss of every one of the more than 200,000 Americans who've lost their lives, I think all along the way, when you think about what could have happened, absent this president's leadership, absent our doctors and nurses, and absent the care and compassion and sacrifice of the American people, you know we can trust the American people with the health of this nation and their families.
You mentioned Dr. Fauci. You know the president said that he's a disaster. He and the other public health officials around him are idiots. Do you care to comment on that?
The scientists who've worked around the White House Coronavirus Task Force, who will meet again today here at the White House, have provided a great public service. They brought the perspective of scientists all along the way. And I have a strong relationship with Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, with Dr. Collins at the NIH and with Dr. Redfield. But remember, the President of the United States has to consider the whole of America. He has to consider all of the interests of the American people. I never begrudge scientists for coming in and making a scientific case. But what the American people have seen all year long is a president who has put the health of America first, but he's also recognized that when it comes to opening up America again, it's not a choice between the health of our citizens and the health of our economy. It's really a choice between health and health. There are real world costs to Americans physically and emotionally and economically to government shutdowns. That's why it's really remarkable that Joe Biden is talking about shutting down our economy again in the future. What this president's been willing to do is listen to the scientists all along the way. When they came and said that we should shut down travel from China and Europe, the president took action. When he said that we should shut down half of the American economy in the middle of March, the president took action. And when they said that we needed to move rapidly on the development of a vaccine, clear out the red tape that would stand in the way of that, before the month of February was out, we already started to develop a vaccine. And in record time, Leslie, we are on track to have the first safe and effective coronavirus vaccine in the world and have tens of millions of doses available for the American people the moment that it's actually approved. That Operation Warp Speed has no precedence in American history or in science, but all along the way, the president's been balancing the broad interests of the country and the health of the American people, and we'll continue to do that every day.
You know,
Leslie, this is the last question.
Oh, it is? Okay. Then I'll say what I was going to say after, because I have to ask you about the fly. I have to. Did you know it was there?
No, not in the least.
You had no idea?
No, none whatsoever.
Have you been teased?
It's a privilege for me to be on that stage representing President Donald Trump.
But were you teased about it? The fly?
That's the last question.
I'm asking to
When I
do that.
came backstage, my 3 kids and my wife were waiting, and they
What'd
gave
they
me a
say?
word of encouragement, and then they said to me, "Dad, you had a fly line on you." And we all have a good sense of humor about it. And I have to tell you, to be on that stage, to be able to make the case of what this president has done, strengthening America's place in the world, rebuilding our military, reviving our economy, reaffirming our commitment to the rule of law and the Constitution in our courts, standing by law and order every day, and to be able to contrast that with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who are leading a Democratic Party that's literally been overtaken by the radical left. I mean, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want higher taxes, open borders, socialized medicine. They're talking about cutting funding to law enforcement, packing the Supreme Court of the United States. It's an agenda that the American people, I think it's an agenda the American people are going to reject on November the 3rd. And
I have to
I have to
interrupt
tell you,
you.
I
This is
sense
our last
the
question.
enthusiasm all across
I
the
have to
country.
interrupt you.
Because this president has kept the promises that he's made to the American people. And just like you saw today at the White House, President Donald Trump is always going to bring a passion and a strength and a
Mr. Vice
determination to put America first.
Mr. Vice President, this was not a rally. This was not just a campaign speech to the public. This was supposed to be an interview. And the same with the president. And I feel that you both have insulted 60 Minutes and me by not answering any of our questions and by giving set campaign speeches that we've heard both of you give at rallies without answering our questions.
Leslie, what
And
question haven't I
feel
answered?
aggrieved.
What question haven't I
Yes,
answered right
You didn't
now?
answer any of my questions, you just gave speeches. And
I've answered every single one of your questions. I'd like to know what question I haven't
Well, I
answered.
asked you about the president calling Fauci an idiot. And I got a speech about the president. I asked you, you know, about mothers, I don't know, you just kept giving me speeches and so did he. And you know, I think that both of you, there is this kind of anticipation that people in power are held accountable and they answer questions for the public, not for me, for the public. And I feel that you didn't do that. And I'm upset.
Well, Leslie, I appreciate the speech that you just gave, but I've answered all your questions, and I've spoken about things the American people care about. The American people want a president who put the health of America first and open up America's
Well, look what you're
economy,
doing right now.
which is exactly what this president is
You're
doing.
giving a speech.
The American people want a president who will stand by the men and women of our armed forces to rebuild our military. That's what this president has done. You asked me not one question about foreign policy at all.
Well, I'd love to.
You-
May I?
I have
Hey,
to tell you.
thanks, guys. I think we're done.
Okay, I got a
The
lot
American
of
people
them.
want
I
a
have
president who will
questions.
stand by all the God-given liberties enshrined in our Constitution, appoint conservatives to our federal courts at every level. You haven't asked me one question about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris refusing to say whether they're going to pack the Supreme Court of the United States.
I had
And I think this is why the American
questions.
people are frustrated with the media, that the issues that are most important to the American people, which are the security and the well-being of the American people and the foundations on which this country stands, are really on the ballot this year. And the president and I, whether you like it or not, whether it fits in to 60 Minutes narrative, the president and I are going to continue to take that case every day to the American people. And I think we're going to have a great victory on November the 3rd.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Leslie.
I give you an elbow. We can take that off.
Yep.